In this short video, I'm going to cover a really important concept in using steroids. So you understand that the body has its own natural production of steroids, and it's important to know how that happens. So this is a cross-section of the brain, and the hypothalamus, which is located at the base of the brain here, and the pituitary gland are neighbors. They're really close together, and they play a really important part of how these hormones, these glucocorticoids, are released in the body and how they're regulated. The release is regulated. And this is what we call a negative feedback loop. So here are our hypothalamus and our pituitary gland, and they're right next to each other. And if you remember, the previous video showed where the adrenal gland is over kind of mid body length, right next to the kidneys. So the control begins here at the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus releases corticotropin releasing hormone, which goes to the pituitary gland, a very short little trip through blood vessels to the pituitary gland, where ACTH, or adrenocorticotropin hormone, is released as stimulated by CRH, okay? So ACTH is released, it goes into the bloodstream, goes down to the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland then releases, in response to that hormone, it releases additional hormones or glucocorticoids. We use this term cortisol to talk about the naturally occurring glucocorticoids that are released from the adrenal gland. Cortisol and cortisone are both released. Cortisone is then converted to cortisol, so we'll just talk mostly about cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone, and it is a hormone that's released typically in response to stress. So that's usually when the adrenal glands start getting going, and it causes a variety of changes in the body that an animal in stress needs. So those are the effects on the body going up here. And then if you think of all three of these as the bloodstream taking it to different parts of the body, and the bloodstream going back to the hypothalamus and to the pituitary gland, this, after the release of cortisol, we're going to have a concentration in these two in the bloodstream. So in response to that, the hypothalamus is able to look at that blood concentration of cortisol and say, okay, that's our limit. We don't want to go any further than that. So what it does is it inhibits the release of corticotropin releasing hormone and the pituitary gland's release of ACTH to the adrenal gland, and basically shuts down the production until the next time that it's needed. There's usually some constant amount that is going out there, some low level of it, but in general there is a limit on how much the body wants to have circulating around. This is really important for when we add to the amount of glucocorticoids or cortisol in the body by giving an animal these drugs. When we give an animal these drugs, it induces this feedback loop, and that in turn inhibits on a more permanent level this hormone release and this hormone release, and that in turn shuts the adrenal gland down. Too much time and the adrenal gland can begin to atrophy. It can actually begin to get smaller and go away. So long-term use of steroids is pretty much discouraged unless we need to, and we want to go with the very lowest level that we can. We're going to come back to this concept, but it's important that you understand that this is a negative feedback loop in terms of when we get to a certain concentration in the bloodstream, it shuts down the production of cortisol. This is also explained in your book, and you need to have a really good understanding of it because we'll bring it up again when we talk about how we give these drugs, how we administer them, how we cut back on them so that we restore the adrenal glands to working in the body.